Come on in, pull up a chair, and take a load off, because today I'll be sharing a bit of a page through, as well as my review of Dungeon Crawl Classics from Goodman Games. Does this old school flavored Appendix N inspired role-playing game demand a place on just about every fantasy game master's shelf? Or is DCC a collection of weirdness, seemingly concocted simply to sell a bunch of oddball-shaped dice? Well, you're going to find out right after this. Howdy, 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 gang. Welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. As I mentioned in the open, I'm going to be reviewing Dungeon Crawl Classics. I do want to mention that I'm going to be talking about what Dungeon Crawl Classics is, as well as what it is not. Because I think there's a little bit of a misconception out there, especially with 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons and 2nd edition Pathfinder players and game masters, about what is DCC. We're going to talk about that. Also want to mention I'm going to do a bit of a page through. We're not going to look at every single page in the book, and I'm going to talk about various aspects of the game, but this is not some super deep dive into the mechanics of DCC. It's important for you to understand that. We're going to talk about things that I like, as well as things that I might find a bit of a head scratcher, but it is not going to be some really deep look at the mechanics of Dungeon Crawl Classics, because if you follow the Gaming Gang, you already know mechanics is not the make or break for me with a role-playing game. I know it's different with everybody, but mechanically, it's not all that important to me. Also, if you're not familiar with me or the Gaming Gang, I have been running role-playing games for over 40 years. My role-playing game of choice is Call of Cthulhu, but I have run loads of other genres as well: fantasy, science fiction, gangsters, Western. You name it, I have probably run it at some point in time. Lastly, I am going to give away 2 copies of Dungeon Crawl Classics in PDF to 2 lucky viewers. And I am going to tell you how you can get in the running to win a copy at some point in this video. I am not going to tell you in the show notes, timestamps, anything like that. But at some point, I will tell you how you can get in the running to win a copy of DCC in PDF from me. Once again, going to give away 2 copies, and it's going to be super easy for you to be able to win. All right, without further ado, we are looking at Dungeon Crawl Classics from Goodman Games. It is written by Joseph Goodman of Goodman Games, right? It's named after him. We are going to talk about some of the other credits when we take a peek at some of the early pages of the book as well. You can score DCC in hardcover for $39.99. The softcover, which is what we're going to be taking a look at, carries an MSRP of $24.99. If you want simply the PDF, you can snag that over at Drive-Thru RPG also for $24.99. Now, of course, the Gaming Gang, thus this video and I, are affiliated with the One Bookshelf's sites. And I would normally say, oh, hey, if you're going to go to Drive-Thru RPG, stop by thegaminggang.com first, click on a banner, blah, blah, blah. I am not going to say that, even though I just said that. The reason is, if you order from Goodman Games and you're going to get the physical books, then you actually also get a PDF absolutely free, which is how I think it should always be with companies. I know there are many of them out there who are not like that they actually charge you for the digital PDF as well as a physical copy. That is not the case with Goodman Games. Also should mention how I got mine is that I ordered the first time fan kit, which includes the soft cover, an adventure, Doom of the Savage Kings, a cardstock judge's screen, which we'll take a look at all these real quickly. I mean, because the main gist of this video is a review of the core book. And it also included a set of Zachi dice. And I got all that for $35 plus tax and shipping. Do you want to mention that this deal is relatively new and I have seen it go in and out of stock? So the first time I was going to order it, it was out of stock. I had to wait for it to come back into stock. So without further ado, let's swing on over to the other camera here because I've got Dungeon Crawl Classics. So it's important for me to point out, this is not a review copy. I purchased this. I have kind of gone back and forth a little bit with someone from Goodman Games over on Twitter. We've just never been able to get on the same page as far as maybe doing some reviews here at the Gaming Gang about Goodman Games releases. And I really wanted to check out Dungeon Crawl Classics. So when I saw that first time fan kit, which I actually shared a news piece about on my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, and then it turned out right after the show it was out of stock. Anyway, when I saw that deal for $35, I was like, you know what? I know. I got to bite the bullet. And I actually ordered this. So it's important for you to know, no one at Goodman Games has provided anyone at the Gaming Gang any sort of compensation for me to share my opinion about this rule book with you. And these days, it's really important that you know that. All right, let's take a look at the back real quick. You're no hero. You're an adventurer, a reaver, a cutpurse, a heathen slayer, a tight-lipped warlock guarding long-dead secrets. You seek gold and glory, winning it with sword and spell. Called in the blood and filth of the weak, the dark, the demons, and the vanquished. There are treasures to be won deep underneath, and you shall have them. DCC RPG is a complete role-playing game of 1970s appendix and fantasy. It's important for you to remember this, and we will talk about this as we go through the review. All right, let's jump on in. I am actually going to skip the kind of gateway, the spread in the first couple of pages here because there's a code for PDF. Just one of the PDFs I'm giving away. So I don't want to have that code out there in the video. I know. All right, let's jump on in. So it's Dungeon Crawl Classics, Golden Glory won by sorcery and sword. There's a little bit of color throughout. There's not a ton. Oh, you know what? I just skipped over the credits, didn't I? Yes. All right, so we've got the credits here, and I'm going to share the interior artist because I always feel that's very, very important. So as I mentioned already, this is designed and written by Joseph Goodman. Additional writing is provided by Michael Curtis, Harley Stroh, and Dieter Zimmerman. Interior art is provided by Jeff D., Jeff Easley, Jason Edwards, Tom Galambos. I got to admit, the book is a little further away from me. This print is pretty small here, so I'm having a little difficulty reading that. Friedrich Haas, Jim Holloway, Doug Kovacs, who does the cover as well as the back of the book. He's got a lot of art throughout this book. He does tons of art for Dungeon Crawl Classics, as far as I know. Diesel LaForce, William McAuslin, Brad McDevitt, Jesse Midden, Peter Mullen. Gosh, I can barely make that out. because it's got somebody Nicholson. Sorry. Errol Otis, Stefan Pogue, the late Jim Rosloff, Chad. Oh my gosh, can't even. I won't even go there. Sorry, Chad. I'm not even going to butcher your last name there. Chuck Wellen and Mike Wilson. So there's a good amount of art throughout this, and remember, this is inspired by Appendix N. And if you are not familiar with what Appendix N is, Gary Gygax, the co-creator of Dungeons and Dragons, provided Appendix N in the Dungeon Master's Guide, and it was all books that had inspired him, and, well, Dave Arneson as well. And it was, I think, 78 is when he put that together. And if you have not read any of the Appendix N material and you're running fantasy role-playing games, I don't know what to tell you. You really do need to read some of the classics. So Dungeon Crawl Classics is also dedicated to the late Jim Rosloff. In fact, his final pieces of art are included in this book as well. We're going to kind of zip through this at a relatively quick pace, hopefully. We're not going to look at everything as well. I'm going to jump in, talking about characters. So the core mechanic. So I know a lot of people say, well, Dungeon Crawl Classics is old school Renaissance, and other people say, no, Dungeon Crawl Classics is not OSR. At the end, when I sum up my thoughts about the book, I will tell you what I think. But the core mechanic is a D20, and it utilizes difficulty class is what they're called. I just say checks. I always say difficulty check because to me that's what a DC stands for. That is essentially the core mechanic of this game. Rolling a D20, you want to roll high. Usually. A 1 is a automatic failure, and a lot of times, of course, if you're attacking, it's a fumble. And if you roll a 20, it is normally an automatic success and a critical hit. So there's a little bit of discussion about how is this game different than other games people play, such as Pathfinder, D&D, even old school retro clones like Labyrinth Lord and Sword and Wizardry. Right, so we get into a discussion of the different characters, how to roll up characters. Dungeon Crawl Classics is the home of the 0 level funnel, where each of the players could have 3, 4, maybe even 5 characters that are going to start off. They have no classes, so they are just usually like villagers, town folk, things like that. There are some excellent 0 level funnels out there. I've actually checked out Sailors on the Seas of, no, wait a second, of the Sunless Sea. I almost said Sailor on the Seas of Fate. Yes, Michael Moorcock. Yes, he is also Appendix N. It is Sailors on the Sunless Sea, which if I remember correctly, I believe it's written by Harley Stroh. So we've got the various different classes. So this has the old school vibe where we have 4 classes and 3 races class. So we've got the cleric, the fighter, the wizard, the thief, the elf, the dwarf, and the halfling. And one of the aspects of Dungeon Crawl Classics I really, really like is every one of these character classes or races, like I said, races class, is interesting, and I would want to role play a character. I can't say that for every fantasy role-playing game out there. I'll give you an example. You'd have to pay me to play a halfling. In DCC, I would really be interested in playing a halfling. Fighters tend to get really the short end of the stick, especially at higher levels. That's way different in Dungeon Crawl Classics. So some of the highlights here. So magic is Vancian in a much more Vancian way than original OD&D, AD&D. you'll have spells, but as long as you're successful casting that spell, you don't lose it. Same with your clerical spells. The clerical spells are you actually, if you fail, you don't lose the spell, but you are actually gaining disfavor with your deity. And I got to be honest, I think out of the classes and the races, I think the cleric kind of gets the short end of the stick a little bit. Thieves are very cool. Luck is one of the attributes in this game that's very, very important. You can spend luck to improve your dice rolls, knowing that once that luck is spent, it is gone for that character. A judge may award some luck for an adventure, but for the most part, when you use luck, you lose it. Thieves actually regain luck each day, and they get to spend their luck and regenerate it, something that every other character class does not do, but a race does, actually even at a higher rate. So one of the things that's very cool about the warrior is the mighty deeds. So the warrior gets to roll it'll all depend on what level they are, but if they're at first level, they're going to roll a D3. A D3, Jeff, what are you talking about? Yes, those are the Zachi dice, and we will talk about that as we go through this. So you roll a D3, and if you get a 3 and you succeed with a hit on your target, you can do something very cool. And of course, you talk about what you're going to do before you roll your dice. But if you roll a 3 and it's a hit, that cool thing can take place. And it's completely, up to the player. It could be anything. They could be looking to try to hamstring a creature that they're battling, or maybe try to knock one creature. Maybe they're fighting a bunch of monsters. Try to knock one monster into the other and kind of maybe do a bit of a domino effect with them. Swinging from chandeliers, dropping on top of somebody and attacking. All of that kind of stuff is completely possible with the mighty deeds. Now, the dwarves also get to utilize mighty deeds. So the fighter and the dwarf get to utilize mighty deeds. The thief and the halfling get to regenerate luck. So that's kind of cool. The elf is basically a fighter magic user. And the wizards are really wild. Magic is very cool in this game. It is very rare, which is straight out of Swords and Sorcery. That is one aspect of modern role-playing games, fantasy role-playing games, that even if they say, oh, well, we're trying to simulate Moorcock and Leiber and Howard and Smith, Vance, they get wrong. There's too much magic in these game worlds. Not so much with Dungeon Crawl Classics. Now, that's not to say you can't be a wizard if you want to be a wizard. Of course you can be a wizard if you want. And once again, with the magic users, if they fail with their roll to cast the spell, then they forget the spell for that day. They have to rememorize it for the next day. If they're successful, then they don't lose the spell. I like that a lot. Low level characters in Dungeon Crawl Classics are a lot more powerful than their counterparts, say, in 5e or Pathfinder. I will mention, as far as the different options you have to customize your characters, they really don't exist that much in Dungeon Crawl Classics, outside of when you're creating your 0-level characters, if you're going to go the funnel route. But I got to be honest, I have always been a fan that your character's backstory is based upon the adventures you take part in, not you sat there for 3 hours at home trying to concoct a backstory that now your game master is going to be forced to try to pigeonhole into the adventure. I've said it, and I've said that in multiple videos with various different role-playing games. That is just my vibe. We have skills by occupation. If you notice here, what did we have? Skills. Boom. Boom. Done. So when you're creating your 0 level funnel characters, they will have an occupation. And it's all random, which I really get a kick out of too, because it's essentially these funnels are what are going to weed out all these characters. So you'll only have a few characters left standing at the end of the adventure, and those are your player characters. So once a 0 level becomes 1st level, they get to choose a class. They already have a race. So if they're already a halfling, they'll still be a halfling, but then they get all of this cool stuff that the classes and races get to do. Combat, once again, if you're looking for an old school vibe where it's rulings over rules without having to sit there and worry about combat matrices and THAC0, this really does work really well. There are fumbles, there are critical hits. We have critical hit tables based on what the character's class and levels are or race. Mighty deeds of arms, so we get some examples to give judges a good idea, and hopefully to share that with players as well. So it's just some examples. This is not to basically kind of limit the players with what they can do, but to give you an idea. Damage and death. So here's what we talk about: burning your luck. So you can burn luck to increase your die rolls. And you don't have to do it before you roll the dice. You can do it after you roll the dice. We've got saving throws. We have 3 categories of saving throws as opposed to, save versus breath weapon, save versus poison. So we have fortitude, will, and reflex or reflexes. We have spell duels. Now, this I thought was very, very cool. Kind of point out the rules aren't as clear as they could be in this rule book. And that is something that kind of runs through a few different things in the core rule book for Dungeon Crawl Classics. And that is things could have been a little tighter, could have been a little bit clearer. Some things that you run across, there's a bit of ambiguity to it. There's some wiggle room. And I know some players and game masters out there are going to be like, well, wait a second, man. I need to have my grappling rules. I need to have my pummeling rules. I need to have my tripping rules. That is not this. I don't mind it so much. I don't mind that there's that bit of wiggle room. And that's actually kind of designed into the game as well. That it's essentially you're looking at the old school vibe of it is rulings, not rules. That's why we just raced through the combat section. Most of the combat section there was dedicated to the mighty deeds more than anything else. So, of course, it's a D20 mechanic. So in combat, you're rolling your D20. You have to equal or better the armor class. Once again, if you roll a 20, it's critical hit, automatic hit. With wizards, we'll start talking about wizards here because the largest section of this book is devoted to magic and spells. When someone sees this core book clocking at 504 pages, the first thing they start thinking is, oh my gosh, how complex is this going to be? I'm not picking that up. It's 504 pages, man. Look at all those rules. Look at all these tables. Oh, no way. I'm not, oh, that's too much for me. Here's the thing, though. All these tables and things that we're going to see as we're paging through here are almost never used. They're for flavor, especially with the magic. So what I love about Dungeon Crawl Classics is that the magic system is unreliable. It is deadly. It is not something that everybody knows. There are no set list of spells that somebody's going to learn. One of the cool things about this is when you level up your wizard, you're not going to sit there and be like, okay, well, now I get to pick new spells. No, you have to go questing for your new spells. You have to learn this magic from possibly other wizards who are very tight-lipped, and even in the book says they're all bastards. What I love about this piece of art here is it's starting off, okay, well, here's our wizard. He's a young guy and all clean cut. And then as he progresses with magical corruption, ends up looking like this. I love it. So we've got different tables about different corruption. We've got deity disapproval. We have patrons. We've got spell lists. There are supposed to be 716 spells that are known. There are no 716 spells in this book. But part of that is because you're expected to create your own spells with the players. I like that as well. So you notice we've got all these kind of tables here. And each of the spells usually will take up at least a page, sometimes a little more than a page. And it's going to tell us what is the level. It's going to tell us kind of generally what this is. Another aspect of the magic system in DCC that I think is excellent is that the way one spellcaster casts a spell is not going to be the same as the way another spellcaster casts a spell. It's mercurial magic is what it's known as. I love it. I think it's awesome. We also have the roles. If you succeed casting the spell, you're going to take a look at the charts for that spell to tell you how successful it was. So the higher your roll, the better the result. Love that. Just like, like Magic Missile, right? Okay, well, in D&D, Magic Missile at 3rd level does this. Well, like I said, magic is very, very unreliable and can be very swingy. That's a word that I would use as far as Dungeon Crawl Classics in a lot of ways. It's very swingy. There's a lot of luck going on. There's a lot going on based on the roll of the dice. Some people won't like that. Other people will love that. And this is the sort of game where if you are the game master, once again, they're known as judges in Dungeon Crawl Classics, don't fudge your dice. Let the dice help tell the story. And I know it's very difficult for game masters out there, and it doesn't matter what game you're running, to sit there and say, wow, I put all this work into this adventure, and oh my gosh, we're just about to have a total party kill if I go with these dice rolls. Well, that's how it works. Anyway, love the artwork throughout. Some of these we get little kind of cartoons. Some of them are kind of funny, especially if you've been playing role-playing games for a good amount of time. Kind of throwback. But as you can see, this is all magic. So this is all wizard magic. And then, of course, we have the different clerical spells. See right there. Boom. And the cleric spells also have that various different kind of like range of success, which I think is very, very cool. The clerics and the wizards are different. So there's what's known as spell burn. Once again, it's another way that you can improve your roll, but it's for wizards only. Wizards are the only ones who are allowed to spell burn. And what it basically is they're giving up points from their attributes to add to the die roll. Super cool concept that I think is very, very interesting as well, because you can't just regain these attributes like immediately. You can, if you're resting in that Yeah, I believe if I remember correctly, I think the rule is 1 point per day. So if a wizard kind of just uses themselves up to make sure that a spell goes off, man, that could leave them in a pretty tight spot. So we get into the judges' rules, and there are a few things in here that don't seem to kind of jive with the rest of what we've looked in here. It's not crazy, but once again, that's what I was talking about, where there's a bit of ambiguity with some of the rules in here. But there's tons of cool stuff. Being a wizard in this game should be a blast, but it will also not be anything like D&D or Pathfinder or any of the old retro clones out there, because magic corrupts. It's just basically how it works. All right, kind of just flipping on through here. We get various different patrons. So the clerics are going to have their deities. Of course, the wizards will have their patrons. Regular characters can have patrons as well. So we get discussion about different magic items. We'll get into monsters. One of the aspects that I think is very cool, too, with Dungeon Crawl Classics is that as far as the monsters, there's a real focus here to make the monsters weird. Make the monsters different. There's nothing worse than a fantasy role-playing game and the characters are first level and the game master has an encounter and, okay, well, these 5 goblins attack. Yawn. Now, myself personally, I have always presented creatures like they don't know what they are. These first level characters, they don't know what goblins are, or 0 level, unless they somehow speak that language because of a random roll. So you can easily change things up just by tweaking things. And that's where a lot of this discussion comes in. There's once again a bunch of random tables, very OSR there. But you can make creatures different just by changing their color. Right? If I described goblins without calling them goblins, but saying that they have dark purple, like a dark purple hue to their skin, it doesn't matter how many fantasy role-playing games my players have played. They're not going to know what those are. And yet they're just still goblins. So we've got our crit tables for the monsters. There's a discussion of magic items as well. So we get a little bit of a bestiary, not a huge bestiary. I'll point that out. If I believe there's fewer than 50 in here, but there's all different ways for you to tweak these creatures as well. Then we'll get into different hirelings, men-at-arms, because once again, that is an old school kind of vibe. Got magic treasures as well. So we've got curses, because it's easy for your player characters to be cursed. So there's some discussion about that. Got a list of different languages. Once again, when you're creating your 0 level funnel characters, everything is random. And I think that's pretty cool. Then we've got Appendix N, inspirational reading. And Appendix N is essentially straight from the Dungeon Master's Guide from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I always have to laugh because Gary Gygax hated when journalists would mention Dungeons and Dragons and Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, any Tolkien in the same breath. He couldn't stand that. Of course, he got over it simply because it was helping him make money. So it was helping sell the game, but he was not a fan of Tolkien. And I have to say that the halflings in Dungeon Crawl Classics really does, they do, I should say, have a Tolkien feel to them. They have a Tolkien flavor. There's a bunch that I'm leaving out about the various different classes and races. But like I said before, I'd be interested in role playing any of the characters that are in DCC. All right, so we're going to finish up. We got 2 adventures in here. One of them is a 0 level funnel, and it is for level 0. The portal under the stairs. You can also easily change around the level of these adventures as well by simply making them tougher or easier, or having more characters as well. All right, then we're going to get into some tables, and then we are going to get into some kind of advertisements at the end. But I like the vibe that Dungeon Crawl Classics has. And there's a lot of adventures out there. There are a lot of zines out there that support DCC. There are a lot of third-party adventures as well. I know some people will be like, well, wait a second. Why is all this page space being wasted on ads? Well, it's actually more along the lines of, hey, if you're looking for more stuff than just what Dungeon Crawl Classics comes out from Goodman Games, here you go. Check these out. And of course, they've got Mutant Crawl Classics. They've got some horror adventures as well. And get some info about various different conventions. Of course, these are 2019 dates. This is the 8th printing of the book here. Oh, there's also, I meant to say, there's also Dungeon Crawl Classics Lankmar for fans of Fritz Leiber's work, which I am a huge fan. I love Fritz Leiber and Fafhrd the Grey Mouser. So we get a list of the adventures that were available up to that point that this was released. So we have DCC 96. Oh, I'm sorry. 99 is where it had left off. And you can join the road crew. So if you run Dungeon Crawl Classics games at stores or conventions, you can get swag. And that is the book. All right, so that is the book itself. Real quick, I'll show you. These are the Zakchi dice. All right, come on. What are you, stuck? There we go. So here was a problem. So I get the sets, and these are supposed to be maned worm dice, or worm, however you want to pronounce that. So they're supposed to be blue, but I have this green D3 for some strange reason. I'll actually mention my order when I wrap up. All right. So these are the odd shaped dice, the D24, the D14, the D16. And one of the mechanics in Dungeon Crawl Classics is a dice chain. So as opposed to sitting there and having roll with advantage or disadvantage or things like that, is you'll actually have a dice chain. So the next die down from a D20 is a D16. So as an example, one of the halflings' abilities is that they can fight with 2 of the same weapon in each hand, and they actually roll a D16 to hit, at least at 0 level. And you can actually crit on a 16, right? It's the highest number on that die, or the lowest, which is 1, is going to be a fumble. So you can also, if you were going up the die chain from a D20, you'd use the D24. Got the D30 as well. So remember I was talking about how you can get the first-time fan kit for $35? Just the dice carry an MSRP of $29.99. We got the Doom of the Savage Kings, which is normally a $9.95 or $99. $9.99. This is a pretty short adventure. It is written by Harley Stroh. And how many pages we got? 15? 17. So it's It's one of the shorter adventures. In fact, I think this is the first Dungeon Crawl Classic adventure that actually utilized the Dungeon Crawl Classics rules, because Dungeon Crawl Classics were originally, I think they were 3.5 D&D adventures. Then they moved to 4. And then at 66.5, we get the Dungeon Crawl Classics rules, which I think these adventures were actually written before the rules were completed. I might be wrong, and I'm sure somebody in the comment section is going to correct me. Speaking of the comment section, so would you like to win a copy of Dungeon Crawl Classics in PDF? I'm going to make it super, super easy. All you got to do is like this video and comment in the comment section. Make it a nice comment. Don't be like a jerk, because I'm certainly not giving cool stuff away to people who are jerks. But that's it. All you got to do, like the video. Oh, I should point out you should be a subscriber as well. So there's 3 things. Be a subscriber to the Gaming Gang channel. That's simply done. Like this video and just comment in the comment section. I don't expect you to write me a novella. Just, say something in the comment section. All right, so there is that book right there. And then this is the judges screen. And remember I said it's a cardstock, but you know what? It's the same real thick cardstock as you would find with the old D&D Dungeon Masters screens. So pretty nice. I think this sells for $19.99. So once again, you get the $29.99 dice, you get the $24.99 core book, you get the $19.99 judges screen, and you also get the $9.99 adventure, all for $35 in the first time fan kit. So pretty sweet. All right, before I wrap up and share my final thoughts and give this a review score, I do want to mention that the order I placed with Goodman Games, I had some problems with. And part of it stems from the fact that when I placed my order, there was an option just to pay with PayPal. And I thought, well, I'll just do that. Then I don't have to fill out a bunch of stuff, my name and address, all that. It'll all be right there when I make my purchase through PayPal. So I did on a Saturday night. And then I right away got an email showing my invoice. I got an email with the links to the PDFs for the 3 items. So I got the core book, the adventure, and the screen PDFs. Those were complimentary. And it said, oh, our goblins are hard at work. They're going to get your order out. And then I didn't hear anything. And the next Thursday rolled around. And I thought, well, geez, what's going on here? I haven't gotten any kind of notice with a tracking number or anything like that. So I reached out to customer service from Goodman Games and talked to Jess. And I think it boiled down to that I didn't have an account. I didn't create an account with Goodman Games. And I think that may have had something to do. Maybe the warehouse wasn't notified that I had placed the order. I don't know. But I do want to mention that. Then I just got the order today. As you saw, I have an incorrect color die in here. And right now, I think it's if you place an order $25 or more at the Goodman Games website, they will include a Conan the Barbarian novel at random. That was not in my box. It's on the invoice. It's on the pull sheet that's in the box, but there is no Conan. So I'm going to chalk this up to, every once in a while you have an order with a game company and things just don't go as planned. I'm going to chalk it up to that. So let's talk about Dungeon Crawl Classics. I think you probably got the idea. I really like this game. I really, really do like this game. Of course, I have not run it. I am going to be running Sailors on the Sunless Sea. That's the name of it off the top of my head. very soon with my best friend Elliot Miller and his family and maybe a couple of friends. So, and I am going to run, of course, as a 0 level funnel. Okay, so I haven't run this game, but I have been running role playing games for over 4 decades. I have read hundreds upon hundreds of role playing game releases. So I have a good feel for how the game will play at the table. Really, really like the thought process behind Dungeon Crawl Classics. Is it going to be for everyone? No, it will not. And the people it's probably not going to be a good fit for are those out there who really are into the whole choosing from umpteen different options for their characters and min-maxing things and coming up with this big elaborate backstory to their characters before they've even played a game. Probably not. I don't think it's going to be up those people's alleys, but they should give it a try, because a lot of times people don't realize that there's something out there that they haven't tried that they might really, really like, but they're only stuck with what they know. So there's that. For game masters who are very, very into everything's got to be plotted and basically it's going scene to scene to scene to scene, who railroad player characters, and not all railroads are bad, but we do know like the adventure paths. And once again, I am not knocking Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder whatsoever. I do reviews of many of the products from both Wizards of the Coast and Paizo and really do like them. But I am just pointing out that game masters out there who need to have everything plotted and they're just basically running the characters through their story or a published story may not necessarily really dig Dungeon Crawl Classics. Okay, so that said, I love this. Yes, I mentioned there's some quibbles that I've got where some of the rules aren't as clear as they could be, or there's a lot of leeway with them. There's ambiguity about the rules. It's fine. It doesn't bother me, because as someone who has a lot of experience running role-playing games, I'll get past that. And I'm famous for taking things that I'm not too keen on, tossing them out, replacing them with something that I think works better. But then again, that's because I have a lot of experience. Does that mean Dungeon Crawl Classics wouldn't work for somebody who is just starting out as a game master or as a judge? Not at all. I think there's a lot in Dungeon Crawl Classics that is really aimed at getting somebody up and running Dungeon Crawl Classics pretty easily. So I don't want to say that, well, if you don't have a lot of experience, you're not going to do well running the game. Not at all. One thing I will point out, though, about Dungeon Crawl Classics is it is written as if you have an understanding of what role-playing games are. There are no 10-page treists about what is a role-playing game in Dungeon Crawl Classics. Also, something I really do like is that it is written relatively conversationally, or I guess I should say we don't encounter a lot of high Gygaxian as we're reading through the book, where it's like, I have pretty good vocabulary, but I guess I better go bust out that dictionary or the thesaurus. Anyway, there's loads and loads of material out there for you to run Dungeon Crawl Classics. Here's the thing I really like the most about DCC, and that is, out of every role-playing game I've ever read, and there have been a lot, I have not read everything, but out of all the role-playing games that I have read, dating all the way back to OD&D, I don't think any of them incorporate the heart of sword and sorcery, appendix, and material quite the way DCC does. Pathfinder, D&D, Can you really simulate Fritz Leiber's work, Ashton Clark Smith's, even even Howard and Lovecraft? Not so much. I'll tell you what, I don't think I've seen, now granted, what is it? Lioness, I think, is the role-playing game that's really based on the Dying Earth, Jack Vance's best known fantasy series. But outside of that, having never seen that, I don't know of another role-playing game that I think incorporates the whole feeling of Vancian magic as well as Dungeon Crawl Classics does. I mean, I got to be honest. I mean, that's how I kind of look at it. It's not going to be for everybody. Your mileage is going to vary. If you have no interest in kind of an old school vibe to your proceedings in role-playing games, this might not be your bag of tricks. Also, do I think this is an old school Renaissance game? See, now this is tricky because no one seems to be able to define the old school Renaissance. The way I look at old school is that, does it give me the feel of those adventures from back in the day? Does it give me the feel of playing fantasy role-playing games from the mid to late 70s, maybe into the early 80s? To me, that's old school Renaissance. Now, other people, they're like, well, no, old school Renaissance it's combat matrices and maybe THAC0, but usually it's like, got to have a combat matrix and it's got to be, everything's, you roll your 3 6-sided dice for your attributes, and you've got your percentile as far as hiding in shadows for thieves and all these other things. So essentially, a lot of people out there feel that a retro clone is old school. And since Dungeon Crawl Classics is not a retro clone, it is actually an open game license, and it is rather modern DC and equaling or beating a DC. That is not old school. That's not old school Renaissance for some people. To me, like I said, old school Renaissance is the vibe. It's the feel. It's the sense of wonder, the sense of things are weird. I've never seen this before. What the hell is that thing? Run! It's going to kill us all. Run! To me, that's OSR. And for me, I think Dungeon Crawl Classics is OSR. All right. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I give Dungeon Crawl Classics the very rarefied 10 out of 10. I like it that much. I think it is excellent. I am really looking forward to running a 0-level funnel with Elliot and his family and friends very shortly. So there you have it. All right. Of course, don't forget, I told you how you can get in the running to win one of 2 PDFs I'm going to be giving away for Dungeon Crawl Classics. I will be announcing the winners on the May 10th, 2021 episode of the Gaming Gang Dispatch, which streams live right here on YouTube. I'll have more to say about that in a moment. But if you like this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, ding that bell. It'll not only let you know when I upload videos such as this, also let you know when I stream the Gaming Gang Dispatch live Monday through Thursday nights, as I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news and first looks at board games, role-playing games, miniature rules, and more. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you so much for stopping by to visit and check out this video. And of course, as I wrap up all my videos during this never-ending pandemic, I certainly hope every one of you out there are being smart, and staying safe. Oh, hey, you're still here. Well, if that's the case, by all means, if you haven't subscribed to the Gaming Gang channel yet, click right here. If you'd like to see the latest episode of the Gaming Gang Dispatch, click right up there. And if you want to trust YouTube's algorithm to give you something to watch, click right there. Once again, thanks so much for watching, and everybody, please wear a mask.